Apparently, the Sarasota Spring Training Orioles in 2024 are just an absolute wagon, cannot be stopped. But much more importantly than the wins is that all three spring training games this weekend were televised. So I'm going to break them all down. Coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Monday, March 4th, 2024, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we're going to recap all three spring training games from the weekend for the O's. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, all three had a broadcast feed. I think that's the only time all spring that is going to happen with three consecutive broadcasted games. So we want to break them all down, treat it kind of like a regular season weekend. The 5 things you need to know from all three games and all three wins for the 9-1 Sarasota Orioles. We'll talk about Friday's game against the Braves, how Tyler Wells and Bruce Zimmerman looked in their first appearances of this spring training season. Talk about the win Saturday over the Yankees, how Kyle Stowers just continues to hit lefties, and Julio Tate and Colton Wong made their Orioles debuts. And then we'll chat about the win on Sunday over the Pirates with Grayson Rodriguez on the hill, and one of the O's pitching prospects making a pretty good impression. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers can join today and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started today. So we're going to run through the weekend here, and it begins with Friday. Originally, this wasn't going to be a broadcasted game, but the Atlanta Braves, they threw something together, basically a 2-camera stream, and that was all we needed because one was the center field cam. That is the best one to have because you can see how the pitches are moving, how a pitcher looks. Now, we did not have StatCast data for Friday, but a broadcast is a broadcast, and the Orioles beat the Braves 3-1 in that one. But I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know from what I saw in that Friday game. And the first thing is Tyler Wells had a clean first outing of the spring. We know Wells is in an interesting spot. Came into the spring us thinking, he could be a starter, but he's probably destined for the bullpen after the Corbin Burnes acquisition. Then you get, of course, the Kyle Bradish injury, the John Means setback, and we're thinking, all right, we're going to put Tyler Wells, we're going to put Cole Irvin into those 2 rotation spots. Wells will be back as a starter. And then you start thinking more and more about the off days early in the season. The Orioles add Julio Tate, and you're like, maybe Wells could still end up in the bullpen early in the year. His role is very much in flux, but he talked to the media after the start Friday. He wants to be a starter. That is what he's focused on. 2 scoreless innings, allowed 1 hit, no strikeouts, no walks for the big right-hander. Thought the stuff looked good in the 2 innings of work. Again, he'll continue to be built up as a starter because more likely than not, he will be in the rotation to begin the season. Now, once John Means would return, that is where the questions start to get asked. And I think at some point this year, Wells will pitch out of the bullpen, but a good start for him. You just hope he can stay healthy and hopefully in 2024, find some way to just keep himself in a little better shape and keep it going throughout an entirety of a 162-game season, something he hasn't been able to do the past 2 years. Second thing you need to know from Friday's game is that Ryan O'Hearn just continues to say, remember me. I mean, we keep talking about, can Heston Kjerstad, can Colton Cowser, can Kyle Stowers, can these guys, Jackson Holliday, make this team big left-handed bats? Well, one of the big reasons the O's had so much success last year is that they kind of found Ryan O'Hearn out of nowhere, and he was a huge producer for this team. And every time he steps in the box, he just looks so comfortable. And he went 2 for 3 with a 2 RBI double in the win on Friday. That was basically the winning hit for the Orioles, and just gets the ball over the plate and crushes it into right center field to bring home 2. And he just did that, it felt like, time and time again last year. And I know the O's are in an interesting spot with O'Hearn. They do have now a team option tacked onto his contract for 2025, so they could keep him around for maybe 2 more years. And there are certainly guys coming up the pipeline ready to go that are in basically his spot on the field and on the roster. But if he keeps hitting, it's his spot to lose. And it doesn't look like anything's going to change heading into this year. Third thing you need to know from Friday's game is that Jackson Holliday got the start at shortstop in this one. First time he has started at short this spring. Rest of his starts have been at second base, and for good reason. The Orioles have talked about, listen, we're going to give Holliday a lot of run at second. And the O's think if Jackson Holliday is going to play a large role for the 2024 Orioles, it's going to be at second base. And it's not really any kind of indictment on his shortstop defense. It's more about how the roster is constructed. The Orioles trust Gunnar Henderson at shortstop so much, and the fact that they're probably still going to roster Jorge Mateo. And although they're trying to turn him into an outfielder as well, even if they do that successfully, his best position is still going to be shortstop, and he's probably still going to play short against left-handed pitching at times. So I just think that you still got to work out Holliday at short, and I thought he did okay. Defensively, looked fine, went 1 for 3 with a double at the plate as well. Good things in that one for Jackson Holliday. Fourth thing you need to know from Friday's spring training game against the Braves is that Bruce Zimmerman, along with Tyler Wells, also made his 2024 spring training debut. He took over in the third inning for Wells and also tossed 2 scoreless innings, allowed 2 hits just like Wells, no walks and no strikeouts for the Orioles lefty. And Zimmerman's kind of been the guy left behind. You know, he had that great start to the 2022 season for about 6 weeks, then it all fell apart, ended up in AAA, bounced up and down a few times with the Orioles last year, but was mostly just part of the Norfolk rotation for most of the year. Then midway through last season, he sustains that core injury. He got some injections. He tried to pitch through it. He just was not 100% healthy for the entire second half of last season. Got the core surgery right when the season ended, is now healthy in spring training and ready to go. And he's in an interesting spot now with Bradish and Means pushed back. I don't think he has, a place where he can get a rotation spot right now, but there is potentially a long relief spot on the opening day roster, maybe open for Bruce Zimmerman, depending on how the O's feel about him. And I know, the fastball is not good. It's not high velocity. It gets hit a lot, but those breaking balls are still really good for Bruce. And that is why he remains on the 40-man roster, despite the fact that the O's didn't use him that much last season. So we will see, if the Orioles do want a long reliever, which they might want more of now because Irvin and Wells, who were going to fill those roles, are going to be in the rotation most likely. If Zimmerman can beat out Jonathan Heasley and Julio Teheran, he could have an opening day roster spot. And the fifth and final thing you need to know from Friday's game is that Colton Cowser played center field. Now, I didn't do much in the plate on Friday, went 0 for 2 with a couple of strikeouts, but he got the start in center, and that is always a good thing to see for Colton Cowser, because that is my biggest question about him. And for a lot of people, that is their biggest question about Colton Cowser. We know it was a struggle at the plate when he first came up last year, but I still believe the bat is there, that small sample size is not an indictment of who Cowser is as a hitter eventually at the big league level. My questions about Cowser are, can he consistently play center field? Now, I think in a pinch, few innings here and there, yes, you can physically put him in center and he won't be any kind of detriment to the team. But in terms of, can he be anything close to an everyday center fielder defensively? At this point, from what I've seen, I don't think he can be. I think he's a really, really good defensive corner outfielder who can play left field at Camden Yards pretty well, but is more of a fill-in center fielder, kind of closer to what Austin Hayes is defensively at this point in his career. But the O's are going to keep trying him in center, because if they feel he can play a solid center field defensively, that's another tick up for him and his chances to make the opening day roster. And, it went fine out there for him on Friday, and he hopes he can continue to have it go fine for him as spring wears on. So that was the Friday win. Then the Orioles turned it around and did it again on Saturday. And that one was on Masson against the Yankees. Even if it's the spring, still feels all right beating the Yankees. And I'll talk about what I noticed from Saturday's spring training game coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. You can get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 just if your bet wins. And you can bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. So after the O's picked up the win on Friday in spring training and there were some solid performances, they did it again on Saturday with a victory over the Yankees. And I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know from that one, which was broadcasted, and that was the second game on MASN so far this spring, second of 7 for the Orioles. Again, because it was at Ed Smith Stadium, there was no StatCast, which is unfortunate, but we did get to see the game on MASN, which was nice to see. And the first thing you need to know from Saturday's game is that Kyle Stowers hit another homer off another left-handed pitcher. This time it was Nick Ramirez, who is a legitimate lefty, who is most likely going to have a spot in the Yankees bullpen on opening day. Was a really nice middle reliever for them through parts of last season as well. And he went deep again. And Stowers, it's not like he's getting hit after hit. He was 4 for 13 going into Sunday's game. But 3 of those 4 hits through Saturday were home runs for Stowers. And all 3 homers had come against left-handed pitchers. And not just that, all major league caliber lefties. Now, we're talking about more okay middle relief left-hander types. All 3 have been off. It's not like he's homered off the best lefties in baseball. But, I mean, Nick Ramirez, Bailey Falter, and Dylan Lee are all big league bullpen lefties. And he's homered off of all 3 of them so far this spring. And I talked about it last week, did the episode last Tuesday. If you haven't checked it out, go do that now. Do the Orioles have too many lefties in their lineup? I tried to parse out that conversation. And basically the reason for that episode and what I was worried about is that when the O's do face a left-handed pitcher, and they will early in the season, and there's a chance in that opening series against the Angels at Camden Yards that the O's face a left-handed starter in all 3 games against Anaheim. And I just thought with how the roster is built and how the O's usually want to hide their younger left-handed hitters and hide them from left-handed pitching, you'll have kind of an open DH spot against lefties where you'll basically, with the roster as currently constructed, be forced to throw one of those young lefties in there. And I feel like the O's would feel better if they had another veteran right-handed hitter to put in that spot. Talked about how Aaron Hicks could have kind of fit there. But for now, they're going to have to throw somebody in there. It's basically about who is going to step up. Well, so far this spring, it's been Kyle Stowers. And remember, when the Orioles first called Stowers up in the second half of the season in 2022, he had good numbers against lefties in the minor leagues. But those don't really matter to the Orioles. Left-handed pitching in the big leagues is way different than left-handed pitching in AAA. And actually, it's quite interesting. When you look at the difference between righties in AAA and righties in the big leagues, obviously there's a gap there. There's a reason why guys are in the big leagues. But if you look at the difference between lefties in AAA and lefties in the big leagues, the gap is actually much wider. And the reason why that is because there's less lefties, and this has just been general for baseball for years and years and years. If you are a lefty with any kind of talent, you have an easier shot than a righty to get to the big league. So across the board, there are a higher percentage of lefties that have okay stuff that are in the bigs than righties with okay stuff. So if you think about it, the lefties that are left in AAA are just worse across the board than the righties that are left out into AAA. So that's one of the reasons why you could hit really well against left-handers in the minors and not do it in the majors. And the O's were still worried about holes in Stowers' swings, and they were hiding him from left-handers. But he's showing this spring, and again, small sample size and spring training results are not a big thing when it comes to making your opening day roster, but it's more about process and approach. And if his approach has changed somehow where he's able to hit lefties better and leave the yard, I've been kind of saying, yes, Stowers has a maybe at best a super outside chance of making the opening day roster. If he's doing this against left-handed pitching, there is much more of an opening for Stowers. He's healthy, had the weird injuries last year, got hit in the face by a pitch, but seems to be back and better than he was when he really struggled early last year, and the O's sent him back down to AAA early in the season and never called him back up. This could be a chance for Kyle Stowers to truly make this team, maybe over Cowser, maybe over Kjerstad, maybe over Holiday, at least to start the season. It could happen, and he's doing everything he can right now. Second thing you need to know from Saturday's game is that Cole Irvin worked deeper into this one. Once again, it was a scoreless start. We were marveling at what Cole Irvin did last weekend in his first start of the spring. Threw a pitch at 96 miles per hour, which he had never done in his career. The velocity was up across the board. Talked about how he went to Tread Athletics, which is kind of a driveline-like program in the winter, and it was first time of his career doing anything like that, and it really improved his stuff. And again, it worked out on Saturday. Now, he was not nearly as crisp in the start Saturday as he was in his first one. I'll say that right there. But allegedly, we didn't get to quite see it because no StatCast, no radar gun on the screen, but the velocities were there just like they were in that first start. The breaking stuff, he had a little bit of command issues, but he still threw 3 scoreless innings, didn't have a strikeout, 1 walk, 3 hits, but 5 ground ball outs of the 9 outs that he recorded was nice to see from Cole Irvin. And the big part of it was with the amount of double plays, he really only recorded quote unquote 6 outs himself because he had 3 double plays. So 5 ground balls out of 6 outs technically. And he said after the game, he really wants to be a ground ball pitcher, be a guy with his stuff that maybe won't have the most strikeouts in the world, but will allow soft contact and a lot of ground balls. And last year in Baltimore, 41% ground ball rate was actually the highest of his career. And if you look in the second half of the season last year when Irvin was much better, both as a starter and a reliever, he had a 50% ground ball rate. That is really, really good for a starting pitcher, and that's when he was at his best. So he is on to something here, and I'm still excited for this Cole Irvin 2024. Third thing you need to know from Saturday's game is that we got to see Dillon Tate in a broadcasted spring training game for the first time since 2022, and I got to say he looked great. I thought from the eye test, again, we didn't have the StatCast numbers or the velocities, but the talk was that he was 93 to 95, which is usual Dillon Tate. I thought from the eye test, he looked just as good as we did kind of the last time we saw him in games coming out of the Orioles bullpen at the end of the 2022 season. How good and reliable of a middle reliever to kind of set up man that he had been for a couple years there with the Orioles. That is what he looked like. Missed all of last year with the forearm and the elbow issues, but got cleared late last year. Not in time to come back for the O's, but in time to be fully healthy this season in spring training. I thought the slider looked really good. The fastball, the changeup had their usual life, had good velocity. Again, I've talked about it earlier this year on the pod. Like, I think Dillon Tate would make the opening day roster, but I always didn't put him on my projections because I just said, I got to see him first. I've seen him, and I know it's only once, and he'll pitch many more times. But I'm ready to say my next projection, it's going to have Dillon Tate in that opening day bullpen. Fourth thing you need to know from Saturday's win over the Yankees is that the 2 new veterans for the Orioles that they picked up on minor league deals this week, the right-handed pitcher Julio Teheran and the second baseman Kolten Wong, both of them made their Orioles spring training debut in Saturday's game. Teheran looked good out of the bullpen, a 1-2-3 inning with a strikeout. I'm sure they'll continue to stretch him out more and more. They're going to want him to be a starting option, maybe not definitely in the rotation, but an option to do it, or at the very least a long reliever as they get closer and closer to opening day. And Kolten Wong got the start at second base, did go 0 for 2 at the plate, but made a couple of nice plays defensively, which is what he's done his entire career with the Cardinals and the Mariners and the Dodgers before coming to Baltimore. And if you want to hear more about their chances to make the opening day roster, go back to my last episode. That was on Thursday, talked about the signings and how they can help the O's, but was nice to see both of them in the orange and black. And the fifth thing you need to know from Saturday's spring training game is that Heston Kjerstad got the start in right field for the O's and made a couple of nice plays out there. Made a nice sliding catch earlier in the spring, made a couple of really nice defensive plays out in left field. And I've said it, Heston Kjerstad never has been, never will be a center fielder. But if he can hold his own defensively in left and right field and be at least Anthony Santander level in terms of his defense, that's going to really help his ability to stick on this roster. Also went 1 for 2 with a run scored at the plate in Saturday's game, but it was nice to see. Got a good jump on a ball, good break. He's not the fastest guy in the world, but made a nice sliding catch to take away a hit. If he can just play those corners okay, the bat is going to carry him, and he's going to be an even more impressive player. But the O's then, they went for the weekend sweep. And again, they had another televised game on Sunday, and Sunday was the best because not only did they win, not only was it televised, but we got the StatCast data as well for Sunday. So we're going to dive into that final game of the weekend coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is the place to buy tickets because you shouldn't have to worry when buying tickets to the next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports events near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. And Game Time, they've got cool things called flash deals. Sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, and more. And there's also zone deals where you pick the section and Game Time picks the seats, which gives you big time savings. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On. That's LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So to finish things out here on a Monday episode, looking through the Orioles' 3 spring training games this weekend, which somehow, someway were all broadcasted that you could watch. And the final one was on Sunday against the Pirates. Pittsburgh's broadcast network does a great job. They show almost every Pirates game of the spring. So when the O's are playing Pittsburgh, there's a good chance it'll be broadcasted, at least if the O's are on the road in Bradenton, which they were on Sunday. Pirates had the broadcast, and we had the StatCast, the TrackMan data as well. Baseball Savant helping us out there. The Orioles won it 5-2 to get to 9-1 this spring. And I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know from Sunday's victory over the Pirates. And the first thing you need to know is Grayson Rodriguez took the mound for the Orioles, and he was wild and he struggled early, but pulled it back together in his second inning of work. Rodriguez, in the end, went 2+ innings. He did face one batter in the third, walked him, and then left the game. It was 49 pitches for Grayson Rodriguez. And listen, the first inning was a little rough. He retired the first 2 batters of the game and then kind of got a little out of sorts, and he ended up walking a couple of guys, and there were 3 hard hit balls against him and 3 hits on the day, 1 run, 2 Ks, and 2 walks for Grayson Rodriguez. But in that second inning, he came back out there, 1-2-3 inning with a couple of strikeouts. The stuff looked a little more crisp in his second inning of work. Now, he only got 2 swings and misses on 16 swings, which is not great. Both came on his slider. But I thought he threw 6 curveballs, and he got some weird-looking swings on those. There were a couple of foul balls against the curveball where it was pretty impressive how good that pitch looked. He threw a lot of fastballs, as we know he would, threw a lot of changeups as well. Only 2 of his new sinker, that new kind of sinker / two-seam or fastball that he's throwing, only 2 of his 49 pitches, so really barely threw it in there, and both got swung at and hit in play. So, we'll see how that pitch goes. He's still working on it. That's what spring training is about. But it was nice to see him kind of have a little bit of a rough inning and then come back out there and settle things down a bit. Second thing you need to know from Sunday's game is that Jorge Mateo got the start in center field and also hit leadoff for the Orioles in that one. And that's big because of all the talk we've heard about Mateo this spring. And I had been talking about it on this podcast all offseason. The Orioles need to make sure Mateo can play center field. And he did it. 20 innings in center for the Orioles last season. And they came into spring saying, we're trying to get him better and better in center. Mateo said he worked 5 days a week this offseason on his outfield defense. And the O's hope he can play both center and left field at Camden Yards as well. And I thought he got some good jumps on some balls in center field, which was very nice to see. He did go 0 for 3 with a strikeout at the plate, but he demolished a ball that turned into a loud out, hit it 107.8 miles per hour off the bat, which was nice to see for Jorge Mateo. Made some fairly good swing decisions. He's mixed with his swing a little bit throughout this offseason, and a little bit less of a leg kick going on for Mateo. Things look a little different mechanically for him. Hopefully that helps him because he was real bad down the stretch at the plate last year, but good thing the O's got him to start in center. He looked fairly comfortable. Hopefully he continues to get those chances this spring, because if he shows he can play those positions with everything else he can do, he's pretty much a lock for the opening day roster, and Brendan Hyde loves him as a super utility guy. Third thing you need to know from Sunday's game is that Colton Cowser and Kyle Stowers just kind of keep on chugging along against left-handed pitching, don't they? Colton Cowser hitting a home run in the third inning of this game, which tied it at 1. It was off the left-handed starter, Martin Perez, the veteran who the Pirates brought in as a free agent to join their starting rotation this year. And it was quite an impressive swing, honestly, from Cowser to hit the home run to tie the game at 1 apiece. It was a breaking ball down and in, kind of a cutter slider at 89 that Perez was trying to front door, and Cowser almost went down to a knee and just looped that thing out to right field, 98 miles per hour off the bat, 372 feet it traveled for a solo home run for Cowser. And I just talked about it with Kyle Stowers, the Orioles needing one of these young left-handed hitters to step up and show that they can hit big league left-handed pitching. Martin Perez, not the pitcher he was a couple of years ago, but certainly a big league caliber left-handed pitcher. And Cowser does it to him. Cowser's been having a really nice spring so far. Already talked about how the O's are putting him in center field. He is certainly pushing for one of these final roster spots. It's going to be a great battle. And then Kyle Stowers had himself a hit as well. In the 8th inning, Stowers had an RBI single that tied the game at 2. Hit it 102 off the bat. And what was that? Kyle Stowers, did he get a hit off a left-hander? Yes, yes, he did get that hit off of a left-hander coming off of Josh Fleming, the lefty who formerly was with the Rays and is now with the Pirates. Just another good sign for Stowers. The two of those guys really just pushing and pushing and pushing for one of those final outfield spots. Fourth thing you need to know from the Orioles win over the Pirates on Sunday is that Cade Povich pitched late in this game through 2 innings for the Orioles, 1 run on 4 hits, 3 strikeouts, no walks on 42 pitches for the left-hander. And although he got hit around a little bit at times, and there were 2 hard hit balls, I was really, really impressed from what we saw from Cade Povich in this game. He got 10 swings and misses in just 2 innings. And remember, he did pitch the 7th and the 8th. So he's not really facing Pirates starting level hitters anymore. And even Pirates starting level hitters are not starting level hitters on a lot of other teams. So he's facing mostly depth and AAA guys at that point at the end of the game, which is what he's already been facing when he pitched in Norfolk last year. But still, to really see it on the broadcast feed and get the Savant data as well from Cade Povich, I thought it was really impressive. He mixed up the pitches, 5 different offerings, kind of spread them out pretty nicely. And I mean, 10 whiffs, 3 on the sinker, 2 on the slider, 4 on the 4-seam fastball, which was showing some really good ride. And he was kind of sitting 91 to 92. He was up to 94 with his fastball. I was just real impressed. And he filled up the zone too, like didn't walk anybody. That was his big issue in Norfolk last year. He dominated Bowie, got to Norfolk and just couldn't stop walking guys. The strikeouts were there. He threw strikes. Every pitch he looked comfortable with. Again, 4 hits is not great in 2 innings, but I was super, super impressed by Cade Povich. Now, Brandon Hyde said it, and we all know it. There's no chance he's getting an opening day roster spot. Same with Justin Armbruster and same with Chase McDermott. But if he can get the walks just in command a little bit and still have this great stuff, because of those 3 guys, Povich has the best raw stuff of the 3, especially as a left-hander. Second half of this season, maybe the O's need a starter. They need something. If Cade Povich is looking like this, he is an option for the Orioles. I was really, really impressed by him on Sunday. Just the mix of pitches, the repertoire that he has, looked more confident than he did at times in AAA last year. Just really, really good stuff from Povich. And the 5th and final thing you need to know from Sunday's win is that Conor Norby was back on the field for the Orioles. One of their top 10 prospects had missed some time this spring with a side injury, finally got into his first spring training game on Sunday. And he said, guys, don't forget about me. Comes in the 8th inning and doubles in his first at-bat. Also had an AB in the 9th as well, but just impressive to see a guy come off the bench, walked in the 9th, double in the 8th, hit at 96.4 off the bat for Conor Norby, who was swinging well enough, and that tells you, okay, that side injury might be all healed. He is ready to go. And Norby's another guy who maybe an outside chance, because we're talking about the Orioles and maybe needing another right-handed bat to make that opening day roster. I feel like it's unlikely. And for me, Conor Norby just feels like another Joey Ortiz where, yeah, he might get some chances here and there in the big leagues this year, but he's just so blocked by so many other prospects that he's good enough to be in the bigs, but he's just going to find himself in AAA. And I think if you were to tell me, okay, Connor, who is the number 1 most likely prospect to be traded this deadline when the O's are looking for some big league pitching help, Conor Norby right now is number 1 atop my list. He's a really good player. He plays second base and left field, and he's not an amazing defender. I just think there's really nowhere he fits super well in Baltimore. It's unfortunate for him, but good to see him healthy and back on the field. And then, of course, here at the end, just got to shout out TT Bowens, who comes in the game as a minor leaguer, got big power. What does he do? Hits the go-ahead 3-run homer in the 9th inning off of a big league reliever, a legitimate big league reliever in Dari Moreta, who was in the game, crushed that 3-run homer. Did TT Bowens hit it 96 off the bat to give the Orioles that 5-2 win in the 9th inning. So cool moment for him, game on TV in a big league spring training game for TT Bowens. But that's how the weekend played out for the Orioles. They do play today on Monday. It's not televised, but they are back on TV. Phillies broadcast on Tuesday, and we get the StatCast data from that one as well. So that's probably the next time we'll be truly breaking down everything that happens in a game. But I will still be back tomorrow. There is news that possibly Gunnar Henderson makes his spring training debut either today or tomorrow. We'll talk about that and get you all the Orioles news and notes when I return tomorrow. But until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.